But I am not presenting anything tonight. So it's just going to be me introducing Steve Roka from the state of Ohio to talk to you guys about the facilities process, school district facilities process. We have him on an exclusive engagement, and after he's done tonight, I doubt we'll ever have the opportunity to have him here again or anyone else from the Facilities Commission. So make sure that you get all of your questions answered, or at least get us some idea of what you might need to know after the fact. So we're going to just sort of jump right into it and get started. So it's good to see everybody. Glad you came out. And with that, Steve, I'll turn it over to you. We'll keep going.
Thank you, David. As David said, my name is Steve Roka. I work for the Facilities Construction Commission as a planning manager. What that entails is me working with school districts to sort out what their master facility plans will be for their building project. My intention here tonight is to kind of explain the guidelines, how the commission interacts with school districts during the planning process, and then answer any questions you have regarding that. So we'll get started here. So a little background about the commission. In 2012, the commission was created by a merger of two other commissions. Well, it was a School Facilities Commission, where I originally worked for back in 2000. The second piece of it is the State Architect's Office. Those two were merged because it was felt that there would be some efficiency given the overlap between what we do. Both agencies did vertical construction. The bulk of what money we spend on is still K-12. There are other university projects, agency projects, the commission funds as well, but those are typically done through the legislature. You can see since we've been in operation since 1997, we've spent about $12 billion, done almost 1,200 schools, new or renovated, and served almost 400 districts to date. And currently there's about 116 projects in design and construction with about a value of $1.6 billion. Now this is the combined value, not just the state's contribution toward that. The commission over time, back in 2007, as a requirement of our funding, we introduced the idea of LEED Silver certification. This is based on the US GBC standard, United States Green Building Council, which is a scale of energy efficiency. And our focus in that time continues to be efficient mechanical and systems like that, but there are other features which we also pursue, and that such as daylighting and air quality, things like that are part of that certification. 2008, the idea was entered into what's called segmenting, meaning when we do a facility plan for a school district, it's the entire plan, K through 12, all the students. Segmenting allows districts to take a smaller bite of the apple, so to speak. So rather than do the entire package, we can do maybe a building or two buildings, whatever is appropriate given whatever the board feels appropriate at the time. 2010, we introduced the idea of high-performance learning environments. Typically what you can hear this is described as 21st century learning. We stick with the high-performance learning environment description for it. What that entails is our model for our buildings doesn't necessarily revolve around the standard 900 square foot classroom. We still provide square footage for the kids, but there are different ways we can divide that up now. More flexible approach to the learning environment, whether it be studios, project-based learning, and things like that. In 2012, another impetus for the consolidation of State Architect's Office and the School Facilities Commission was the introduction of construction delivery methods. Prior to 2012, the state of Ohio and any other public owner within the state had basically one choice. That was the multi-prime. You had to have a general contractor and a separate contractor for the electrical contractor, and a different contractor for the mechanical and plumbing and fire protection. It was very cumbersome for a owner to manage all those prime contracts and keep everything coordinated and on schedule, because obviously different parties, different interests, so you tend to get a lot of conflicts. The merger, the construction delivery methods allow us to now do ways that are a little more efficient. Construction manager at risk, for instance. Design build, another model, as well as a single prime for the entire package, not just 5. Recently, in 2017, storm shelters / safe rooms became a requirement of the Ohio Basic Building Code. Regardless of whether you take our funding or not, that is a requirement across the board. It does impact our funding and the amount of the cost of the project. So we talk about that because it does increase the cost to a certain extent, because it requires reinforcement of a certain size space within the building based on the occupancy of that building. Now I'll talk a little bit about the fundamentals of the process of what we do and why we do it. First and foremost for the Commission and its funding model is equity among all K-12 school districts we are participating with for funding. Mainly that involves saying a classroom should look like a classroom, a learning environment, regardless of where you are in the state. There's the look and feel of the room itself. And then there's also to what extent we're funding that. And that's largely based on enrollment. That's probably our biggest driver in terms of what the scope and project size is in terms of dollars. OFCC pursues this mission through 4 programs. The Classroom Facilities Assistance Program, which is our funded program, our meat and potatoes program, largely responsible for the $12 billion I mentioned earlier in the current 1.6. We also have the Exceptional Needs Program. That's based on a facility condition assessment done, and it's an applicant-based selection. And then third is the Expedited Local Partnership Program. That is a program that allows districts to start a project within our master plan framework ahead of when the state dollars will arrive. There's no state funding brought to the table with that one. It is a credit the district builds toward their local share, what will eventually be a co-funded project. So there's a bit of a time lag between when the project is started and finished versus when we actually will come with co-funding. The last bullet there is the Alternative Facilities Assistance Program. That program is new to the Commission, and we have a couple districts going through it. The difference between that and the others are it still requires us to go through the planning process. However, it does change the requirement of what the scope of the project is. And the state's contribution toward that project will be one of 2 numbers, either 10% of what the state share would be. So if we had a $9 million project and the state share was 10%, that would be $900,000, or $1 million, whichever is higher. So it's going to be dependent on the calculation of the overall cost of the plan. The requirement in that program is the district has to have a local match equal to or greater than the state's contribution. It does, however, allow districts to do parts and pieces of a plan, not an entire building. However, if a district chooses that route, that satisfies, in the Commission's mind, that we've served that district. So that's the rub. But like I said earlier, we have to, regardless of which program, there's a planning process involved that where we arrive at an agreed upon plan, state and local contributions, and then the boards approve it, and then subsequently the Commission will approve it. Supplemental information. I share this with you because this deals directly with your school district. And what this is a history of your historical equity ranking. Equity ranking is one of the 3 legs of the stool I talk about when it comes to what the facility master plan is. The other 2 legs are the facility condition assessment. The 3rd leg is the design manual cost update. We are required by law to follow the Ohio Department of Education equity ranking list, which says published every September 1st. Okay? So your history since 2015 has been fairly flat, I would say, except it started to tail off in this current year. This funding ratio would apply to your project under, let's say, the ELP program and up through August of next year. This equity ranking will apply to the funded projects beginning in July 1st of 2019. The formula, what Department of Ed bases this on is your enrollment divided by your overall poverty assessed valuation. So that's in essence how you get that ranking. Now, in order for you to move on that scale, obviously some districts have to move around you in order for you to go. This number can change next year either way. It just depends on what's going on around you. And that has to do with a lot of factors, a lot of it outside of our control. The property valuation is a big one. When the tangible personal property taxes were rolled back several years ago, it created some advantage of some districts and disadvantage for others. The point is, things can change year to year. So, quick history of what the Commission's engagement has been with Bowling Green City Schools. The district submitted an application back in 2015, and that triggered the Commission to send out a team of our assessors, architects, and engineers to evaluate the condition of all your current buildings that we had if you're doing K-12 education. We reviewed those findings with the district in December of 2015. We put together a few options for the district administration to consider in February of 16, and you can see the other things there, the enrollment and the cost update, Ohio School Design Manual cost sets were from 2015. At that point, the district and Commission decided, well, we're interested, but maybe not so much, so we're satisfied with what the information given us, and it's solid information as far as the assessment goes. But as far as additional planning services, we sort of parted ways at that point. Fundamentals of the process. We talk about building assessments of the existing schools. That's the condition of what the school building is, 23 categories of cost. Mechanical systems, heating system, air conditioning, roofing, plumbing, electrical, all evaluated independently for each building. And that's in terms of what the assessors find. It does not anticipate any design changes to the building. It simply says this is what the condition of the facility is based on standards that are applied nationally to other buildings, school buildings specifically. Your enrollment projections at that point in time were 3,203 students for the year 2025, 26. What that means is we do a 10-year projection based on a 10-year history. If you are an increasing district, we go out to the 10th year, which is what's indicated here. If you're a declining enrollment district, then we go out to the 5th year. The thought with that is that the 5th year is going to be about the time, should funding come together, the project agreement arrived at with the Commission, that will be about the completion time of the project. So that's the theory behind the 5th year for declining enrollment. Your equity ranking today is 506 or 82%. The other slide illustrated that. You had it, obviously, were higher back in 16 when we were meeting with the administration. School Design Manual cost set updated annually in the April meeting with the Commission. So those will then be applied to districts that our Commission is funding or approving at their July meeting. The Facilities Construction Commission meets quarterly. They meet in January, April, July, and October to approve projects and take up other business, but mostly with K-12. Some agency stuff goes on, but predominantly the business that goes on at that meeting is K-12 business. This is a sample facility plan, again, based on data and information, the enrollments from 3 years ago, the cost section 3 years ago. I show this to illustrate you how these elements come together in terms of enrollment, building condition assessment, and cost set. This plan would, for instance, propose renovating additions to Crim Elementary for that number of students and will be about a $4.4 million project. Renovate in additions to Kenwood Elementary for roughly the same number of students pre-K through 5, $10.6 million. Renovate this building, which we're treating as a combined school because they're connected, middle and high school, for 2,200 students. That's a $31 million project. Then the abate demo of Conneaut Elementary School, which is above the 2/3 guideline. I'll talk about that in a little bit. And that would be about $200,000. The total cost of this plan would be $46.8 million. The bottom of that is $350,000, which is a project agreement LFI, mainly work that will go on in your auditorium. I said we don't fund auditoriums. And then there's the pro-funded plan of $46.5 million. I just want to emphasize, this is a plan, not the plan for your school district. Part of what we want to do when we engage with the district in planning is talk about what their intentions are, what their preferences are, and then kind of see where that fits within our guidelines, how far we can stretch the state pro-funded program in with your district. So there are obviously guidelines. I'll touch on some of those in a minute. reinforce the point where equity ranking is based on today's numbers. And yes, your share will be 83% of that, or our share will be roughly $8 million, so your share will be the difference of that. So it's again, a ballpark figure. But again, these numbers are a little old, so we want to rely on those. One feature about the ELF program, if you were to engage us to do an ELF project, the credit you accrue would have to be applied for when the CPAP program comes around. If it's not, then the credit's forfeit. There are a few instances around the state where districts early on in the program, let's say in 2000, so 18 years ago, would have done an ELF program, done a portion to renovate a building. Enrollment declined in the past 18 years, and the money they spent on that, they abandoned that building as K-12, took it out of service, and so therefore that credit no longer applies. This is part of the things changing over time.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
In that plan, what happened to Conneon?
It's a vacant demolished.
What happens to the students that were in it?
They are part of that. They're put in the other buildings. What
Thank you. I just wanted, I didn't see it on there.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, because I'll step into that. It's part of the talk now, but
Sorry.
we're required, no, that's fine, because I'll get to it eventually, and it's important to understand that when we do a master facility plan, we want to use all the available square footage. So it may or may not line up exactly with the way you're utilizing facilities. So that's part of the planning process of coming to understanding how that interacts, how that works. And then further, that gives you more information, the board more information. Is this or isn't a realistic, viable option for us to undertake with the state? I want to say the planning, yes. What I want to also emphasize is there's no requirement or mandate a school district work with the commission. I work with a range of school districts from low wealth is 20% local share, 15% local share, way up to Worthington and Gahanna around Columbus. Worthington's 15% state share, Gahanna's 10% state share. All those different motives are entering into the commission's program. Now, I mentioned Worthington and Gahanna. Worthington specifically, we just passed a week ago, is going to be going middle schools. Because of the magnitude of their programs, over $250 million program, the state share at that percentage of 15 is going to be over $30 million, $35 million, close to that. So that's basically a building in the big picture. So it's going to, a lot of considerations go into this. It's not exclusively just about percentages. However, to sidestep back into the program time, the next steps for the district are, depends on the board's desire, your desires, and timing. The nice thing about the ELF program, I keep circling back to that because that's the one viable option of the four I mentioned, and I'll talk about a little bit of that in a minute, is because you can start doing something today and start to build credit should the district desire to do that. The activities before we would enter into an agreement, we'd have to go through the rest of the planning process. We would want to at least validate our building assessments. And what that means is we want to have the district bring in their own team of architects and engineers, take a look at our work, compare it with what that team sees, and we can adjust, amend, or revise what those assessments say. We can increase scope, we can decrease scope, depending on, to come to some agreement what the appropriate level of renovation work might be. In some cases, it might push a building from, let's say, 60% over to 2/3 guideline. I will say that 2/3 guideline is there as a guideline. It's not, again, a requirement. If the building's over 2/3, is the 67%, that you have to replace it. The commission will continue to work with you for that building up to 100% of the cost to build new. Then we're going to stop COFO. That mainly grew out of the urban districts back in the day. Number two, we want to again re-engage and talk about what the options are, and again, what's in the district's interests are, not only just building-wise, but educationally. What's going to work best for your district? How will our co-funding model fit within that? Then we leave it up to the district to decide which plan you want to go with. The options could be one option, it could be 10 options, with subtle differences among the 10. It's again, we want to be able to evaluate with you what the good pros and the cons are. And then the fourth step would be the board and OFCC would approve the master facility plan. And again, I'm assuming ELP in this bullet point 4 here, this a discrete portion. Under ELP, I talked about building credit. That credit is built through districts accomplishing discrete portions. It could be a portion of a building renovated. Let's say replace the roof of a building, replace the electrical system of a building, whatever is going to make the most sense. Again, to circle back to one, validating and building assessment is important because those local team of architects and engineers will help guide what's the most reasonable and realistic discrete portion that can be done. Then the district would secure funds for that discrete portion. That's then at the last bullet point is obviously at that point in time, we want to execute the agreement. That locks everything in, that locks your low percentage in. But the other two parts I mentioned earlier, the enrollment and the cost set will change over time. And then, as I mentioned there, CPAP funding several years away. And what does several years mean? Right now, we have about 100 districts in our planning queue. The good thing about our planning is we've been successful with districts the past 4 years. The bad thing is we've been successful. What that means is there's more need than we have funds available to go around. So it's a very long waiting list for a limited amount of resources. However, when I say limited, the legislators are pretty diligent about appropriating every 2 years about $600 million for our program. So that just gives you an idea statewide what's going on. A lot of success. So again, good problem to have, but it does push availability of funds and our ability to serve districts back a few years. Talking about your specific assessments here. This high school, this building we're in, the middle high school, assessed at 36%. You asked a question earlier about Conneaut Elementary, hence it's set at 78% replace, renovate to replace. Hence that's why I assumed it will be abated, demolished. The other two, 19% and 61% respectively. 19 is a pretty solid number. The 61%, if that continues, the desire to be a renovation candidate, I would want to put a little more light on that and make sure and test that assessment that we're going to be able, it's going to make sense long term. Again, mentioned below the asterisk, we recommend replacement for renovation and ratio. To replace ratio exceeds 2/3. That's strictly the size of the building, to renovate, the cost to renovate divided by the cost to replace it. It's not assuming any design changes beyond those 23 systems that we have. I believe you're on your website. Yes, sir?
Just a quick question on the middle school, high school. You said you evaluated it as a combined building because they're connected.
Correct.
So is the 36%, that building's almost brand new over there. This is obviously not. So how does that 36% play into this part of it? I mean, it's just connected by a hallway.
It's right, but it winds up just being an average. Obviously, the newer building's going to be assess a much lower percentage than this building. So when you combine the two, it basically averages out to 36% across the board.
Right. So it's really not a fair assessment of this structure.
If you, I believe the information's on your, last time I checked your website, that you'll see those 23 categories and the cost. You'll see, yes, absolutely, you'll see differences between the two, and you'll see where this is treated as the original building and that is the addition, and it'll respectively tell you how that each addition shook out. Because not only do we look at the whole building, we look at each part of the building as an assessment.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
When is the percent that the state would shoulder if an agreement is made? When is that locked in? Because according to your figures, it looks like our percentage has been declining from 13% a couple years ago now down to 17%. When is that number locked in should we decide to go along with your program?
That number is locked in when we actually enter into agreement. Now, when we approve the agreement and it goes to our state controlling board, finally, and they approve it, bless it, there's a 13-month window beginning at that date to when you can actually expend $1 million, and that's the threshold of expenditure to lock in at that percentage. Okay, so there's a few moving parts added to answer your question. Basically, it's within the 13 months from the approval of the project. So, if you were to approve the project, the board and the commission between now and August of 19, that percentage of 83 local, 17% is what we're relying on. If we go past August into September, then it's going to be a different calculation. Yes, ma'am.
Is that approval from one of your previous slides, step 4 or step 6? Is that the final signing of the agreement, or is it the step where the DOE and the OFCC approve?
It would be with this at the signing of the agreement technically.
Thank you.
Because we're not going to sign an agreement where, well, let me back up. It's really the approval, okay? The prior question, gentleman behind you, was when does that take effect? So it is the approval of the agreement. It gets signed when the money is available, and then we can go. That's what anchors the agreement. Yes, sir.
And that, this process doesn't include, in addition, for additional classrooms or converting, the cafeteria into a chemistry research lab.
Two questions there. One was additional square footage above and beyond what the enrollment supports in our formulas. The second piece of it is, could we repurpose some spaces within this building, let's say, for other uses? The answer is yes, you could do that. But that analysis would require, again, an architectural team taking a look at this. What's this space, let's give this location, et cetera, what's its best purpose to change it to? And if it's reasonable, we certainly would add the dollars to support that. Mainly it's going to be either adding walls or taking away a few walls. The basic infrastructure is going to be on a unit cost basis across the entire building. So we would support that.
But the availability of that money
Yes.
is based on the ranking. Am I correct?
The availability is honestly what the legislature appropriates.
But as far as what's available, how does your ranking figure into that?
The ranking simply will get us calculate this, what the state and local share requirement is for the project. The availability of state funding, that remains to be seen. With the election of a new governor, administration coming in, again, the priorities, we don't know what those are yet. We know there's a lot more need than we have funds for right now. So I'm not sure I've answered your question, but
I don't think you have, because you only have a set amount of money. How do you decide who gets it?
who gets it?
Who gets it? I mean, yes.
The-
Say
okay,
you got a
the-
couple hundred schools.
You're right, okay, I think if I, now I'm maybe catching the drift here. We're required to follow from the least wealthy to most wealthy. That's been the trend and the way the program was set up. Over the course of time, the tobacco securitization infused $4 billion into our program that had to be allocated in a very short amount of time. What happened there is we had to reach out to several districts at once in the course of that 3 years to get enough districts in the pool where that $3 billion of state money could be committed. What that meant is we had to skip over a few in that equity ranking or sequence because those districts may not have been ready for whatever reason. So we created this priority list. So to answer your question, it's a combination. The equity ranking will establish state and local share. Priority ranking will kind of give us a sense of what order we're able to serve you.
So how do you get to the priority ranking?
Based on what we think the legislature is going to be appropriating and then how many districts we have in the planning queue. Planning queue being the ones that are teeing up for funding. So with 100 out there, we're not really doing a lot of outreach right now trying to add more districts to our queue because the appropriation levels are insufficient for us to serve all those districts in 1 year, so to speak.
So where does Bowling Green sit in the priority ranking?
Today you are at 83% local share, 17%. But that's the state and local share ratio. You're still years away. If I had to say today, give you that you're at least 10 years away. Because if you just do a simple 10-year serving 10-year districts, 10-year districts per year, that times divided by 10 divided by 100, 100 divided by 10, that's 10 years.
That's what I meant.
It's not, now, that can change, but that's about as much certainty as I can give you. So I wouldn't want to bet on that, because it could increase, it could decrease. So my hope is it would increase see.
Well, I'm just,
Hang on, there was a couple other questions.
Just repeat your last sentence. I think I might have got my knees wrong. I guess my question was, where we're ranked in, you said we get 17%.
Mhm.
From the time you signed the agreement, how long does it usually take to go through the design manual for a school? Is there like an average number, like 15 months?
For the actual design of a building,
Yeah, like all your, the whole, for school district to go through the process in the facility planning guide.
well, the planning itself will take, I would say, a year to 2 years. And the 2-year window is there because we feel it's important for districts to have conversations about what they want their educational delivery to be, how they want, how it works today, how they envision it working 10 years from now. Because why go through this process, build something and have it not work? And I'm not talking about necessarily what went on in the 70s with a bunch of open plan buildings, something more specific than that.
One part of it, then the 17% from the time you start this process and the time you finish, if our ranking changes, could we be entitled to more of a percentage, or is that locked in at 17?
It only locks in if we sign an agreement and you're able to spend $1 million within that 13-month window. So, okay, those are two pieces that have to come into alignment that actually create the lock. We can do a plan, we can have everybody sign off and approve it, but if you don't spend $1 million, it goes away. Basically dissolves, there's no more agreement at that point. So it's sort of has a limited shelf life.
so along the same lines, then, if we do enter into an agreement with the ELPP program, 10 years roughly away from being able to get any funding from you for that, is there any guarantee that the school system will ever get those funds?
It's a promise from the state, not a guarantee. I mean, I'm going to tell you it's an ironclad guarantee because who knows what happens. I mean, if some serious emergency arises, all bets are off at that point. But at least you have an anchor with us. At least the state said they would do it back when. So that, to me, you know,
Right.
at least intuitively had a little more weight than had you been deferring or not working with us at all. What I would say is our planning process is a pretty solid process. Again, it's not going to cost you anything for you to go through that with us, whether it takes you a year, 5 years. I've been working with Oberlin since 2006. They just passed in the EL, and we entered ELPP, and they're going to be doing a portion of the K-12 building. So there's no limit per se on how long you work with this. It's not like I'm up there every month, but it's been 10 years. So. And it's, again, at no cost to the district. So I guess if I had to put a plug in, we're happy to help. And we can certainly give you arm you with the information that would allow you to make a decision. Does this make sense? Or not make sense to work with the state on the project? Not all districts will. And that's fine. We're okay with that too.
Just to be clear, they have to meet the master plan requirements as an L district in order to
Correct.
get the money. So just
Yes.
so they understand
Yes.
that.
Yes.
What was that?
So
Can you
use
say that
the
over
mic
again?
and explain what I just told.
What David said. No. The clarity for the point is, in order to get the qualifier for the funds and for the credit to account, the project has to meet the design manual requirements. So, but we are flexible, believe it or not, on those requirements.
When Shoot asked her question, you said something about you have to spend $1 million.
Mhm.
I missed, what are we spending $1 million on?
$1 million could be any cost that related to the building project, architectural fees related to the design, or it could be actual contracts to do work. In Worthington's case, we anchored their ELP agreement with 3 re-roofing projects that totaled about $2 million, which they're going to be doing that work like next summer, and then the planning for the middle school is just beginning. So we're probably amending their ELP agreement to incorporate those middle schools for credit. Yes, ma'am.
Let's say we were to sign an agreement and it was going to be 10 years before we got the money. But we have to start the project, so then do we have to borrow, say, the full cost of the project, figuring that you're going to pay off some of it with the state money eventually?
You do not have to complete a project, meaning renovate or build a whole new building. You could do, in the case of a renovation, you do parts of the building. In Oberlin's case, it's a new building, but only going to build a portion of it. The ELP program gives you that flexibility to do bits and pieces. The rest other programs are building, if you do the segment, for example, and we're co-funding, you have to do the entire building. Or the ENP is a building replacement program. So ELP does give you more options, actually. It's a little more cumbersome for us to evaluate, but it does give you some options.
Steve Baker.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you've obviously changed names in different programs, early 2000s. Did you ever default on any of the programs previous to this merger?
Default?
Yeah, so I guess what I'm asking is, we're 10 years out. I mean, there were obviously agreements made with school districts and different entities before that. I'm sure they were what, grandfathered in maybe into the new program?
And there's been no default per se. I mean, if we've been able to meet the funding requirement, yes, we will do that. So it's,
You look like a young guy. You plan on retiring and doing this, right?
Thank you for the compliment. As far as my personal goals are in life, I've been working for the state, two other agencies, and this undoubtedly, for me, has been the most rewarding. I don't say that just to be, smooth. It's the reality of it. And believe me, there's a lot of issues that go with it. Yes, gray hair gives it away. So. Yes, sir.
Can we?
There's a question.
If a school district wanted to renovate or just replace a few things in the building, does that whole building need to be brought up to code?
The whole building, there's two, yes, eventually the whole building will have to be brought up to code. But the parts and pieces that you'll be replacing that are called out in our assessment, yes, they'll all have to be code compliant. The mechanical system, for instance, if you did an HVAC replacement in this building, it would have to meet the code. So, and that by default is going to meet our design manual. So, it's always going to have to be code.
I think what she's asking is, does that trigger, say the building doesn't have a restroom that's ADHD compliant? Do we have to update all of that just because we replaced the heating system?
I'm going to defer to the architects of record. All right? Yes, if there's ADA requirements built into our assessment, it's going to be it's sort of a prioritization in what makes the most sense to address first. So.
If we were in a project where we was going to renovate or build new 3 buildings, that $1 million could be put into one building as to settle your $1 million. Is that correct? So in other words, we could work on one building, but the other 2 could still be out there in the plan, but not active at that point?
That's correct. The plan, again, the plan is going to assume that the work you're doing is going to be OSDM compliant. And we have consultants that will track all that on a quarterly basis with you. Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if I heard you correctly. You said that we can use your planning services without a cost?
That's correct.
What is the scope of those, all the planning services, architectural?
No, unfortunately not. When I say planning services, you get me or one of my colleagues and our regional program consultant who's not here tonight, but a colleague from Regency from Cleveland would be the one that would come out here. They would develop plans, options with you. That's when I say planning services. This is what the district wants to build versus this is how much the state will co-fund. If it all hand in glove, it's a perfect match, great. If there's more you want to do, and oftentimes there is, we'll obviously have to explain what the limits of that our co-funding model will give you. So when I say planning services, it isn't architectural things per se. But we certainly want to help you understand the financial piece of it and what what our funding footprint and how your educational footprint will overlap.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, there was a question here, 2 or 2 questions ago. She asked if we renovate a portion of the building, does
segments have to be up to code?
Not necessarily, no, not as far as code goes. Again, if it's a building code matter, it's going to boil down to what the architects are going to recommend you do. Some you may have to do because if there are real ADA issues, you may have to address those immediately versus waiting. But if other things, maybe they can wait. So, but again, codes change. Now, not a little, probably this storm shelter has been the biggest thing. Frankly, our design manual for choices for HVAC systems have always tended to exceed the code, including the energy models. So it wasn't a big stretch for us to adopt the LEED Silver standard for our buildings.
Thank you.
At the end of your presentation.
I'm getting close. How'd that happen?
I went back. I wanted to. I cheated while you were looking.
No, that's fine. David and I first worked together about 10, 12 years ago as a district on the river, Toronto City, so. Okay. I'll talk a little bit about the enrollment projection. This kind of gives you a snapshot of what the components of it are. The 10-year projection, past 10 years, and we utilize a cohort survival method, which is the percentage of students that move from kindergarten to first grade to second grade, and so on up through 12. It's a standard model pretty much all demographers use to do enrollment projections for school districts. Essentially, it relies on the past to predict the future. Other factors we consider are birth rates, housing data, open enrollment, kids open enrolling in the district, as well as community school enrollment. All these are features that are included in the report that we provide for the district. But when we did it back in 2015, you've seen all that as well. I did include a slide from shows you what your enrollment actually looks like, and this is from our report. So you can see there's a little bit of a dip from 2006-07 academic year to 2014-15, then it shot up. The top row is our projection we did back in 2013 for you. The bottom row there of that side of the slide is the actual. So it illustrates that although it's not always a pleasing thing to discuss, that when the district enrollment is declining, we believe strongly in the methodology we discussed on the earlier slide and its accuracy. Part of my task in the commission is not only working with school districts, but also kind of heading up the enrollment committee. So I feel confident in that what we're doing, particularly the past 10 years, has been pretty good. Okay, so as far as the graph is, the purple line, history, the blue line is what we were forecasting in the future. Again, these numbers are stale because we're missing like 3 years to compare against. Actually, more than that at this point. So this would indicate if you had a change, particularly in your lower grades, your K, your first graders, if those enrollments have gone up, that's going to influence this entire trend positively. It's gone down, it's going to be the opposite, it's going to be negative. So that's something. Regardless, when you mentioned planning services a little earlier, we would also take a second look at this as well. We're not going to ignore this as well. So obviously this is, we talk about equity. If there is a keystone or an anchor to our program, it is square foot per child, dollars per square foot to serve those children. So that is our, yes sir.
When you do your enrollment projections, like drifted out into the future, do those take into consideration, or like the numbers you have up there, the preschool children that are now in our district that didn't used to be and don't have to be? So depending on what happens with a building project, you know, there may be 100, 200 preschool children that take up space. Does that qualify?
Only special needs pre-K we fund for. The rest of the pre-K we do not. Yeah, understood. And it's one that's the awkward point in the conversation about enrollment. Guess what? We have 100 kids, maybe you're doing a program that reaches beyond your district for that. Fine, so that's something we've never historically done. On the other hand, we've always funded for all-day kindergarten. Not every district has followed that model in terms of the way they design their building. However, it's always been baked into our enrollment and our calculation of square footage.
All right, since we're on IEPs, special needs and all that, does the state give each IEP $25,000 to work for each student for outside the IEP and the special needs? And does that determine what we can use for the building?
That almost sounds like an operation question. In terms of what the districts are granted from the foundation money to support the IEPs. I'll take a tangent here from a personal note. My daughter teaches at a school in Columbus, a private school, 50% autistic, 50% peers. So although I don't work with IEP, I catch enough through osmosis what she goes through. It's a very intensive process. And not only that, it's obviously the lesson plan. Answer your question maybe differently from the facility perspective. We encourage that kind of engagement, however, because we don't know where the educational delivery is going. Who knows? 10 years from now, every student, regardless of where they've been on that scale, maybe required to have an IEP. And obviously, we rely on, I'm not trying to editorialize this just the fact, because I went through the program too when I was a kid. We tend to group kids by the day they were born. You're 6 years old, you enter first grade, 7 years old, et cetera, went all through. Obviously, different students develop at different rates, and I would consider myself a late bloomer, so I wasn't the best student. So, I mean, that's the part of what we want to talk about, I encourage you to talk about during this course of a planning a building project, how the facilities will fit that model. In working with Sandusky City, again, I'm kind of, pardon me while I kind of draw from some examples here. Superintendent came in that district, they had made several runs at the ballot in terms of building questions. When Dr. Sanders took over, and he came out of retirement to do it, he went through a very rigorous process, 15 pillars of that school district. Operations, education, administration, etc. The last pillar was facilities. He went through a 2-year process of intensive engagement with everybody, staff, students, community, to figure out what they want to do, how they want to do it. And then he said, okay, Steve, this is what we want to do. How can you help us? What's going to fit? What's not going to fit? That was the result of that process. So I think that's the benefit of going through the planning process. And obviously we can't do all of it. We'll be able to assist you in terms of what the state can and won't go fund. But I appreciate your question, not from what I do daily, but also from personally because of my daughter's experience. So thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I realize that this is what you do and you believe in what you do, and I totally get that. I'm just curious, why are there districts that choose not to go 3 years? What are the reasons that people would choose not to? Because what you're saying sounds really good, and you do all these things for free, and that's a lot of services that you're providing. In addition, we may get some funding down the road and all of that. Why would a school choose not to go with you then?
Some districts believe, and I leave it to them to explain what that is, I'm not trying to interpret it, that they would rather not deal with the state and do their own thing, and that's fine. Again, there's no mandate that says you have to work with us. So I respect that decision as well, and I'm not hurt by it. I mean, I mentioned Gahanna earlier. They decided we were going to help them with their new elementary building and give them credit for that. The last minute, superintendent called and said, you know what? We appreciate everything you do and believe in everything you do. Part of what we're going to do is going to be compliant, but we understand there's a timeline here we're trying to address. We're replacing basically, use this word, a not good building. And we don't want to get too encumbered with your steps and processes.
So timeline would be one reason.
That, but yes.
Okay. I'm just trying to understand
Yeah.
the whole picture.
I just appreciate that. Thank you. Mr. Chamberlain.
You've been doing this a long time, not a lot of them. Do you have any comparisons on cost? Because one of the concerns around here is it's just not cost effective to use you. So do you have any comparisons over history, like, well, we did this one, and this one's a lot like this one, and are we in the same ballpark? Are you in the same ballpark as the rest of the world?
Am I? Well, that's a loaded question. I don't know how to answer that. I mean,
the rest of the people here will attest that I give those.
I think this. if you visited one of our facilities and believe that's what you want to have in your district, I'd say consider our program. I can't say may do it, but it's a consideration. One of the motives Worthington had was residents are visiting buildings projects done with the commission, and they were, well, this is certainly different from what we have, and they obviously felt better because they believe in the standard. So it doesn't always boil down to dollars and cents argument. What do we want to do for our kids? Yes, ma'am. Thanks.
You had talked about the different projects at the beginning, and the one of them probably wouldn't qualify for essentially 10 years. Is there anything that would qualify in the next 3 years, even 4? Currently where we stand today. I understand you can't always guess.
Your viable option if you want to start a building project with us in the next couple of years is to go the help route. Then the burden is the financing on you at that point for credit eventually. But that would be the quickest route and the one route that's available to you today.
So just to understand, so that project is available to us immediately right now. If we choose to engage and go through your process and work through the steps and get our educational goals in line and then sit down and prepare the buildings and so on and so forth, that can move ahead tomorrow with the credit coming in the future. Is that?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
That's what I thought.
When is the end date for the, I mean, is there like saying you have to finish by, you start this project now, you're gonna have to be done by this date here?
No end date. No. Again, we don't get involved in the administration of the design and the construction. That's just the district. The requirement is you have to use our forms. However, that requirement's been waived in a lot of cases recently. Architects and districts sometimes prefer to use what's called the AIA forms, the American Institute of Architects. And that's, again, if that, our legal counsel okay with that, I'm not going to interfere with that. So, yes, ma'am.
Do we have to show stability in our funds before we could move forward?
You have to certify funds, yes.
So we have to have the funds approved, like a levy approved before we can enter an agreement with you?
That's correct. Well,
Not under ELP.
you can, under ELP, you can enter the agreement, but the credit does not start accumulating until, terms of that agreement will go away if you don't spend any money in 13 months.
Oh,
So,
I'm just trying to figure out the timeline of the whole thing. Like,
Yeah.
How long are we talking before we
Yeah,
can
we
start
need to
building
put that-
buildings?
put
Or
that-
renovating buildings, or whatever we decide to do?
there's a lot of moving parts to this, and that's part of the planning process, obviously, so.
Again, if we did enter the ELP program, it is 10 years down the road that we're eligible for funding. Do we get, say we spend $10 million in the interim period on paying back the bond payments and so forth. If we spent that money, do we get all of the money in the 10th year that would have been your share during the 10 years, or is it prorated going forward, starting in that year going forward?
When we enter into a CFAP agreement, which is the funded program, and we'll say that the credit you've accumulated is part of the plan. And we'll say it's a segment, okay? If that work was done, actually we can credit all of it at that point in time, whether it's in that building we're working on or not. So to answer your question, yes, the credit becomes available to you, so you get the money back at that point in time. Our share of the full credit expended, yes.
Okay.
Not our share of that credit.
Your share of the credit, yeah.
Yeah,
full
absolutely.
Share of the credit.
Go ahead.
But if our total plan is 100%, my understanding is we have to pay 83% and you only play up to 17%.
Correct.
So we're still on the hook for the 83% to implement the plan.
That's correct.
Even if we start through this process.
One thing, it's kind of this state actually is getting a benefit from you starting an L project now versus 5 years from now, because construction costs are going to continue to go up. So yeah, we're going to be reimbursing your 70% at a construction cost you incurred today rather than 5 years from now.
If we took the capital improvement money that we've already got under levy, which is continued. Could that money be directed to fixing up an elementary, for example, and use that $1 million to fix that school building up? And that meet the qualifications of the $1 million?
If the work you're contemplating for that $1 million is out of the assessment and fits with our guidelines, yes, it can be done.
So Steve, that $1 million is causing some confusion. Can you recap, because that's just to lock the agreement. That's
Correct.
not.
Yeah, but I'm saying though, we may not just have $1 million sitting there in the thing, but if we
Right.
took the capital improvement money and put it to renovation or something, if we so desired to go that route, then we met that goal of that $1 million.
Right, but if you spend nothing beyond that,
Oh,
yeah, I mean.
no, I mean by that time,
Right.
hopefully you got a little room to start working
Right.
with another levy or something
Yeah.
over a 5-year or 10-year basis.
I'll do a recap and just try to make sure we clear this up.
The financial guys, that's, I'm sorry. I'll be with you in a minute. Go ahead, sir.
So if we were to enter into an ELPP,
Right.
and let's say, because I like round numbers, it's 100 million. So we today would be eligible for a credit of 17 million.
Correct.
That's a 17% today. Construction costs in 10 years are 10% higher than they were today. We're still only eligible for that 17 million. The increase in cost of construction is not figured into that credit if we do bulk A now, bulk B in 5 years, C in 10 years out, and so on and so forth.
We adjust the cost at each step of the way. So if the construction costs go up from, we'll say, phase 1 to phase 2, we'll adjust, so it would still be at the same 83-17 ratio. If the construction cost, let's say, went up 10%, we're in the game with you with that additional cost, and again, so on and so forth, until the CFAP program comes.
Okay.
We amend the agreement as we go to capture that. Okay?
Okay.
Or as the one thing that will lock you in is that state and local ratio, 17 to 83.
Okay.
Construction costs will change, enrollment will change. Both those factors will affect the size and scope of the cost of the project.
I heard you say that there's flexibility, and that's one thing that I've heard over the years that the school facilities people did not have. That they also always mandated certain size of classroom and everything. So could you expand on that, please?
That's the next slide. Real quick, eligible uses of state funding. This is not an inclusive list, just to give you some of the high points. The building construction costs, obviously. Furnishings, like the tables you're sitting at, technology, screens, whatever, part of the infrastructure. Design and construction management fees, allowances to waive, demolish, and abandon buildings. Non-eligible expenses would be cost to build or renovate board offices or fixed seat auditoriums or athletic fields, etc. So we'll go through all that with you at each step of the way, what fits in, what doesn't fit in our model. Now, flexibility. When I first came to the commission in 2000, yes, you are correct. There's a 900 square foot classroom was the standard, the design manual standard, and we pretty stuck to our guns with that, mainly because an elementary kid, you need that 900 square feet for different uses and to be flexible within that space. Same with now a lab in a high school, 1,200 square feet. Middle school lab, same thing. What we found over time is, and we touched on this earlier, kids learn differently, different teaching styles, etc. Better to be flexible with that square footage and not say, use the guideline. I hesitate to say mandate because there's been quite a mandate, but it's been a pretty firm guideline. That not every classroom has to be the same. A project, a suite of rooms for, let's say, middle school, it could have an art studio. Rather than an art studio, it could be a project learning lab. I worked with Austin Town Local several years ago. Their middle school, which they built on their own, almost matched design manual perfectly, but because they did it outside the L program, we were not able to give them credit. They have a program there where they design, this middle school kids design and build a soapbox derby car to enter in Akron every year. That's the project. They get signs, they're made to write history about, asked to write history about it. So again, when you start to think about education in those terms, we understand it's not going to be the same size, same type of room is going to fit every need. So that's when we say flexibility, that's really what I'm getting at in terms of the facility. So I hope that answers your question.
Because the question before was, why would we not go with you? And I think that's been one of the...
In spite of what Dave said, I'm happy to come back and show examples of buildings we've opened this past year. And unfortunately, on the east side of the state, but they're very flexible and open. Even the kindergarten rooms have a lot of flexibility to them. And you can have a roof garden. So,
And that's basically, I've kind of perused your design manual a little bit. It's like 2,200 pages, so you can't read it all, but
you just did. I'll say,
is
bless
it-
you.
Yeah.
That's a challenge I'm not.
So it's all, tell me if I'm getting this right, it's all based on your educational vision is the first point you have to have. Is that correct? So
That's,
there's,
yes.
the way I read it, there was a lot of steps in there, a lot of different options in there. You just had to, that had to be first, right?
We urge that. I'm not going to make it a requirement, but if we pursue this flexibility, we're going to want to see that there's some discipline to the process and some steps that we've gone through to make that happen. It explains the rationale for it. So, I mean, our traditional building is still a decent building, but the flexibility has to come with some sense of how you arrive at the decision and why. And we want to make sure that the board is in agreement with that when we sign off on that as well. So there's a sign off from both board and commission that during the course of design that yes, this is what we think we want to, sure we want to build, because this is what our vision is for the future. Talked about this already, but like this is the last slide. So this is very, it's a cliff note of what's in that 2,200-page manual. Because it does go into systems and things like that, which...
Well, it goes in the size of mirrors in bathrooms if you want.
There's still a block of wood in the wall for pencil sharpening, so go figure.
I guess as of right now, in that previous, very beginning, very first slide, what you present is 48 million to rent, to do all the buildings currently.
Renovation, correct.
That bring them up to code?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Bring the usable conditions up to code?
Yep. Now, I would say that those are numbers are from 2015. We want to, again, evaluate the assessment, make sure we've captured all the scope, because if we left something out, it's going to be more than that. And neither one of us are just trying to explain that one. We know there's a little higher contingency in a renovation versus new build, but you got to be in the ballpark.
It doesn't add square footage.
It does not add square footage. I think the elementaries are added, but again, I made a lot of assumption. That's me operating from 30,000 foot view of what it might look like. It has not any direct connection with reality other than the number of kids and the size of existing facilities. Beyond that, still an open slate.
And you're not funding preschool?
Not right now, unfortunately, no. I didn't say unfortunately. It's the way the law works. Yes, sir.
But if we decided in one building we wanted a couple extra classrooms, we could see if that fit in your footprint.
It could. We can change the enrollment around to get there, or you can add additional dollars on top of this co-funded amount to get there, to add that square footage. That's an option.
We're not locked out of adding square footage.
No, absolutely. I didn't really hit that point too hard, but there is the LFIs, which allow you the option of going extra square footage, more work in that auditorium than we would typically see. We'll always fund life safety regardless of what the space is. The auditorium will get sprinklers, things like that, exit lights, emergency lighting.
Would it be best for us in our analysis of different types of facilities to consider movable partitions?
There's a lot of different ways to look at that. You know, the overhead door with glass could be a sliding panel, and it's a myriad of ways to look at what an operable partition, not the traditional thing that you move as a track in the ceiling.
Right, but you can expand if you want to move it to have a lab. You can move that.
Right.
wall, so you have a lab.
Right, or even, for example, if there's somebody was classroom behind those lockers, you can open that space to this. It's going to be more a common area, suite of rooms. Sorry, sir, you
That was predicated on the initial configuration of facilities.
Yes.
So if there were an alteration in the configuration, which could be less expensive, then, you know,
Yes, we will review, we will go through all that with, so if that, like I said, that, what I showed there as a sample plan is true. It's not gospel, it's flexible. You can change it, and it's going to go up or down. My guess is, without thinking, unless I see an updated enrollment, it could put more burden or cost on the district. What was up there. Yes, sir.
You say you don't pay for auditoriums. I get that. But I've talked to a couple of school districts that if they incorporate walls that are part of the other structures, like you might pay for 3 walls of that auditorium, but you can't call it the auditorium, is that right?
Go on.
It's all in how the architect lays this thing out. So if it's an outside structural wall that holds the building up, just so happens that that might be part of the auditorium, but still needed to hold the building.
If you want a rule of thumb, and again, it's going to vary on the design solution for this, to be more specific to answer your question, the slope of the rate for auditorium, we don't pay. Fixed seats, so we don't pay for.
Right.
Now, we do cafeterias that have tiered steps and things like that, but they have that dual purpose function of cafeteria and theater space. So the dedicated theater space, we don't do.
There are ways to incorporate one.
And the creativity of the architect, I mean, that's, I think, really where to answer your question is. Yes, sir.
Looking at the very first slide that you showed, your vision appears to me to effectively obsolete all existing school buildings. And the challenge is we're paying for these 50 or 60-year-old buildings that really aren't functional in what appears to be your vision, open learning, segmenting, different sorts of green, et cetera, that you have in the buildings. The leader of our financial committee said that there's some loans now that can be 50 years. Our buildings are 60. If we go to your project, we build them according to you, we're basically going to be potentially having obsolete buildings by the time we're done paying. How can we repurpose buildings, or why are buildings not functional? And half the length of time, some of us live in houses that are twice as old as our school buildings.
There's a lot of layers to your question, and if you look at strictly the financial aspect of it, it's going to be, you know, is the type of improvement going to last the length of the financing, the bonds, whatever sold, outlive that, basically, okay? The other piece of it is that this moving target of what education is and what it is you think it is today, what we think it'll be in 10 years, what it might be in 20 years. So saying all that, I mean, I think flexibility as far as the facility goes is still the key. How you get there, what kind of structural frame to put in. Maybe it isn't a series of modular block walls, but it's more of an open steel frame, open type of construction that think walls can be moved around over time. You're still going to have the systems will obviously have a useful life. So there's only so long that whatever you pay for that system, it's going to eventually be out of date. You won't be able to buy parts for it, whatever the reason. It needs to be replaced. The code requirement, the fresh air requirements today are much more stringent than they were 20, 30 years ago. So as these things change over time, every time you have an intervention to renovate a building, you're going to have to bring up the code. So that default setting is we don't know in each step what that is going to look like. So what we know is what we know today. We know what the condition of the facility is today. That's why we urge districts to bring in another team, of architects that confirm what we have, what makes sense long term. We do renovate. I mean, we work with schools. The urbans had done renovation projects. Akron, for instance, King Elementary School. one of the projects, in a way, I was kind of sad to see we have to tear it down and replace it, because not only was that building built in the 20s, but it had a certain way it was laid out. You could tell it was the 20s, had a boys' entrance, girls' entrance, kindergarten on one side of the building. The other thing that featured that building that made it, in my mind, have some historical weight is it was the first public building the AA held meetings in. Well, that's kind of neat, to say the least. But when we started looking at the structure and why the brick walls were going out, there were steel beams embedded in those walls that were rusting and expanding, and the fix for that district was going to be easily $1.5 million more over and above what the commission's going to fund. So the heartfelt decision, you know what, we want to replace what we want it to look like, what were the original building, and very successful project in the community. It was saved parts of the building, repurposed parts of, terracotta work, things like that. So I'm not sure I've answered your question, but I don't know, built-in obsolescence is just, in some ways, it's just the nature of what we do with buildings. They're current today, 20 years, who knows? So.
One other thing related to renovations, can you speak to other projects that you've done where a school system has decided to renovate buildings and they get into the project and they go, we found some stuff that we didn't anticipate?
Yeah, that does happen.
And how often does that happen? What is the damage a lot of the time? Those are the kind of things.
It can be significant in terms of going over and above what we'll co-fund. So yes, the needle shifts more in the district than what they're going to have to pay for, past just a straight percentage. So that's the in so many words what the damage is. But we try and again, going through the assessments a second time at least to make sure we take a closer look, because then the architects can start to look at not just what the condition of it is as our assessors do, but what could this building be? Could we repurpose it? Does it make sense to repurpose? What's the cost? What's the benefit? So it's a little bit of back and forth exercise. Yes, it has happened, but the reason why most districts in the end will shift to a new building, because the cost benefit suggests that's
and just for the folks' information, it has happened in this building. When we renovated the old weight room or whatever down here, the locker rooms down there were some issues with that weren't anticipated, floor collapse.
They ran out of money at Crum too with their last updates.
So just
because of issues.
Food for thought.
Well, they chose not to put the bathrooms in, and the modified
I'm not even talking that though. It's other issues with, I think, electrical and stuff when they got into the walls that were issues and they ran out of funding.
There's things when you renovate, there's things that you don't know about till you open it up.
But we had $11 million sitting in the account, why didn't I get covered? Didn't we have 11 million during that time? Or at least 7 million? We could have covered the expenses during that.
Are we locked into certain contractors that we have to use?
The school district probably said, no, we're not going to spend any money, we're going to put the money here.
We got some answers.
Locked into certain
Like,
contractors.
do we have to choose from a certain list of contractors, or is it independent?
What's going to qualify a contractor to bid on any public work is their bonding capacity and the ability to do the work. So the bonding capacity would suggest what their financial status is, and can they, are they on solid footing financially? So that any public owner is going to have to go through there's going to be some rigorous process to it. A benefit of working with us is we know a lot of contractors and architects that work in this field, in this niche market of K-12. So you can get the benefit of our kind of knowledge. And some of us good, a lot of good contractors and architects out there do this work. Occasionally there's some issues. I won't deny that. We've had to face those ourselves financially to handle the school district to try to resolve them. It's never pleasant.
Does it simply go out to lowest bid then? Or is that how?
If you, back to delivery models, and part of what changed in 2012, the two models that rely on that hard bid are the multi-prime and the single prime. You design the building, you bid the building, and that's the cost of the building is what it is on bid day. The other two models, design, build, and construct and manage at risk, provide you select the builder based on a qualification process, as well as a price or what they intend to spend or propose to spend on their personnel services and other general conditions that are all part of any public contract, trailers, facilities, the fencing, things like that, they're going to be there. Those two models allow an owner, not flexibility, but allow the owners to review the proposed subcontractors with its construction manager at risk or the design builder is proposing to use on that project. What that means is, in pricing, if you want to see what the lowest price is, and again, it's market dependent, a hard bid is going to be your best way to do it. It may not be perfect because the market today is pretty wicked for the owners right now because the costs are so expensive. The construction manager at risk or design build relies on that interaction, but you may not get the best price per se. This is to compare, if you ever could compare apples to apples. It's hard to do that in this world with these type of projects, but it would probably not be the least expensive. I say that probably. But you're going to get this set of contractors and subcontractors you prefer, rather than the ones that are just going to show up on bid day. And I'm not trying to disparage contractors, believe me, I've worked with tons of good ones. So.
I think on this comparing new, I'm not opposed to new, I'm not opposed to renovation. I think it's going to come down to cost. If you take a look at the study that was done in 15, the middle school, even though it was a new facility, needed $2.2 million to bring it up to the standard in renovation. If you build a brand new building or renovate, you're going to know that you're going to have to ultimately do something. But if you build a new building, 10 years from now, things are going to change. So you're still going to have the renovation of a new building. Right now, I think the school district has to look at what is feasible, what's going to get voted through. And if you say we're going to go only new building, we've already went through 2 ballots. It's got to be within the reach of the voters and the property owners and the income tax.
Steve, just kind of recap again the following part there.
Yeah, one of the initial, I guess, plan, the example plan you used for our district, I mean, it showed a couple $200,000-$300,000 to demolish Conneaut. Could we just sell it?
You could.
Okay.
But I will say one thing about those dollars, that does not involve any what we call an enhanced environmental assessment, where we send the team in to take a closer look at what might be behind the walls as far as hazardous materials.
Right.
So likely those costs will be higher. To answer your question, yes, it could be sold. However, abatement dollars could abate that building before it's sold.
Good.
Don't sell it before you abate it.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
All right, so I'm just trying to understand the very first step in this process, if you're going to do this properly, whether the district uses your money or not, really needs to be the educational vision of what you're going to do with this thing today, 10 years, 15 years down the road. Is that a fairly accurate statement rather than?
That's our strong recommendation.
Because there's a facilities task force that's been put together that's being charged with come up with your opinion, come up with your idea. What are these buildings going to look like? Where are they going to be? How big are they going to be? And those are the things we're charged with not one comment on this is what we're going to do inside them.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible to do that task, isn't it?
I'd be happy to share. We have 4 pre-qualified educational vision firms we use, 3 in state and 1 a gentleman from New Hampshire. Very good, but comes in from out of state. But we'd be happy to share that information with you and at least talk to them. We'd be happy to chat and kind of get a feel for what the services they can provide, how far you want to go with it.
Sure.
Because what we can co-fund and treat as a credible expense is what we call a 3-day exercise in terms of what this visioning is. The trick here is with help, you almost have to be under contract for it to be creditable. If you spend the money in advance of that, then you're same with architects and other kind of things.
And in all fairness, we haven't invited Dr. McCarty in to speak to us about that vision, nor have we surveyed teachers. So I think the Facilities Commission needs to look at that first, because She did talk about that at the board meeting last night when it was
About the
asked.
vision.
I mean, nobody, the facilities commission has not invited her.
So
to
maybe
come
it
and
already
talk.
exists, we just
Right.
need
Yeah.
to get a
Right.
copy of it.
Just because they're poor, we used, I mean, you have to stick with that person. I mean, other people are capable. I know there's a lady from Chicago who does this, Brain Spaces, her name's Amy Urko. She's not on our pre-qual list, but we welcome her. Other firms, architecture firms brought her in. So I guess to answer, maybe a better way to look at your question you're answering it, or asking is, again, I encourage you to bring in an architecture firm and maybe make those supplemental services with that firm, not just to reassess the condition, but talk about things like use, future use, and repurposing things, and what makes sense.
We have a firm right now working with us for free.
Okay.
So if they're missing this, not kind of like a, hey, stop. You know, do you know what you're doing? You know,
Yeah,
I mean, it's like, it's kind of scary. And you got a firm coming in representing right now.
Spot, which firm is it?
Fanning and Howard.
Okay, they're familiar with everything I've talked about. They really are. And if they want to give me a call, that's fine too. So. Yes, sir.
I think we've been looking on the facilities committee is brick and mortar issues. You know, is plumbing still holding water? You know, am I gonna get shocked like switch on the light switch? And I really think what we need to do, and I think we saw some of it at Conneaut, when we see kids go having a classroom on the stage in the gym, and teachers meeting with students in custodial closets with a slop sink next to them. I think we really need to focus on, okay, how many classrooms do we really need? How many special classrooms do we really need, or facilities? For the total system, and then say, okay, well, does it make sense to put 4 fourth grades over here, and 4 over here, or 4 over here, or maybe 8 here and 4 here, or what makes sense? But we still haven't talked about what we need in the way of classroom facilities, educational facilities, teacher support facilities, special needs kids. And I think that's probably what we ought to try to get some of the people from the central office in and say, I'm interested in the enrollment of each grade. I'm interested in how many kids we should have in each grade. I want to find out how we can reduce operating costs by better assigning kids or whatever, and come out with a better educational outcome for the kids. And then we can talk about, you know, well, the electrical system's to hell, so we need to replace them to support what we need for the kids.
Two questions. I'm not sure who's first, but go ahead, ma'am.
Okay. So when you're on the Conneaut screen, it said something along the lines of $8 million to renovate and $10 million to build new. So does it approximately cost $10 million to build a new elementary school?
That size, the same size as Conneaut.
So,
In 2015 dollars.
Yeah.
right, okay, so theoretically, it's 2 years ago, it's about $10 million to
Right.
build a brand new elementary school that size.
Correct.
So essentially, we could take $10 million and build a brand new elementary school where they wanted to do the consolidation, and it would still cost about $10 million 2 years ago.
Is that to build a new school, or is that to renovate what we had at Coney?
Well, it was renovate and
Yeah, there's not- yeah.
8 million to renovate and 10 million for new.
What the percentages on it, because the renovation was like 8 something, and the new build was 10
They
something.
won't
so
renovate
it's
it
like
because it's over the
17%.
60s. They won't renovate
Right
Coney.
there.
Yeah. For Conneaut, that $10 million, the ratio is based on square footage. That's it. So we're saying that building was $8.2 million to renovate, and is going to cost 10.6 to replace that same square footage. I have to go in and take a deeper look at the plan and how many kids, what's the capacity, what's the square footage, and therefore what's the capacity. Our minimum building is 350 students per building, okay? That's about a $10, $12 million building. I should say closer to 12 these days, and that's about a 43,000 square foot facility. Conneaut may or may not be that size. So to answer your question specifically, 350 is the minimum, and it's going to cost probably at least, let's just split the difference, $11 million to build it. And it's probably going to go up in a few months when we do the design manual cost updates in April.
No, that's fine. I sit on both
Yeah.
financial and facilities, and I mean, I just suggested, hey, if we're running out of room in the 3 elementaries that we have, why don't we build a 4th elementary since we used to have 5? And
Yeah.
some people look at me with a light bulb, and some people look at me in horror.
And I'll tell you about from experience, the 350 student elementary, yes, it could be funded, but there's going to be difficulty programming it, meaning finding enough square footage and number of types of spaces within that 40,000 square foot to make it work properly. The second thing is in terms of cost, what we've seen in the market. And building that small, it's almost impossible. I'm not saying it hasn't happened, but it's an impossible feat to bring that thing on budget because it's a small building, there's not a lot of economy of scale. Even when you do 2 or 3 of those, they're still difficult because of site constraints and things like that may be present. So it's possible, but it's going to bring with it a set of challenges a larger building would not have.
Maybe we could always, just thinking here, it sits on 10 acres. We keep the original structure, which is, but we can also, when you do a new building on that 10 acres with that original building there, with the state?
You could build on, yes, on an existing site that, yes, the district is responsible for providing building sites, so yeah. There's a couple more hands on it.
But back in the back.
Yes, sir.
Is there an appeal process for the ranking? If one can show, let me back up. If we don't agree with where we're at in the ranking, because there's 2 outliers that exist in our school district.
Okay.
That is the formula that the state uses that is completely giving a misrepresentation of our community. One of them is the valuation of agricultural farmland, and the other is the social economic stratification of the economic income by 20% of residents that reside in the Bowling Green area. Okay, so that leaves everybody else, and it throws it off. If the rhythm, maybe not.
Yeah, well, by example, there are districts I work along the river that are like in your range of property, well, the way the Department of Ed calculates it. And I don't see it. Appalachia areas like that, because it's a chemical plant in that district. It belies, what you're talking about, why it works the way it does. We are required, however, to follow that formula. So, to answer your question, can you appeal it? It's be a tough appeal, and I think several districts have attempted it. Ones that have entered the program and dials moved in their favor. Most 100% of the time, that doesn't get past the governor's desk or makes it out of the legislature to into the bill when there's a challenge to that or an attempt to change it. So that's.
But we have a new governor that ran on an education platform.
But it's got to get through the general. But it would have to go through the General Assembly to the governor.
Well, and the problem with the state is going to be, we're going to have a huge backlog of, guess what, the district we funded at 60% state share, now it's at 80% state share. I mean, you talk about the 10-year backlog of what's on the books now, it's just, it's making them not shilling for the rationale, but it poses a huge challenge for the state. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
I also looked into your assessment a little bit. Could you explain, there's a procedure of if-then statements in the assessment stuff. So if the heating systems were built before like 1975, it's a total replacement. You know, can you speak to some of that? Maybe explain a little bit to us?
Sure. That some of those are by default settings, I'll call it, of the age of the system. Plumbing, for example, is 40 years, or electrical is like 35, or roof, depending on the type of roof, low slope or flat roof, is going to have a 10-year life cycle. If that roof was 8 years old when we assessed it, and now we come back to survey and it's 12 years old, guess what? They went from probably renovate or fix it to replace it. So those things, but some things just, once you cross that threshold, it's an automatic replacement. So it's what we use what we call the assessment cost guidelines for that. Again, if you're interested, I can provide a copy of that. I'm pretty sure that's on our website. So there's some rationale behind it, but it shows what the useful life is.
I was kind of curious, a lot of it defaults to square footage, is that not right? Because
that's the unit cost basis mainly is what drives the assessment. Now, there are some other ways of looking at it. Like, for example, you'll see for site work, there's like a blanket allowance of $50,000 just put in for every site, regardless, because of unknowns.
yeah, it brought the question to my mind because we looked at the middle school, which is 10 years old, and the high school, and on the assessments, it was 1.2 million for the middle school and 1.2 million for technology for the high school, and I'm going 160 years old dealing with 10. How does that work out?
Well, because the technology is probably, it assumes they're replacing everything.
Okay.
Okay. There's a couple more hands.
You said that to date, and I'm presuming this is since 2012, roughly 400 districts you've worked with. Are any of those double as far as they've been able to come back again based on where they are in the ranking system?
If we've served, no, not really.
No.
Once they enter the agreement with us, that ratio is accurate. Yes, ma'am.
In your ranking, you said the denominator was the assessed property valuation?
Correct.
Does the Bowling Green State University figure into that at all?
No.
No, but yes.
Yes, right.
Rental units do.
You and Oberlin should get together because there's the same issue there.
We work with the university. Yeah, every other university. It's a double whammy for us because we've got all that value that there's no tax dollars being paid in.
Exactly.
And then we have all this value of rental units that have no students to go with them to dilute the property value.
We work with what we have. I'm not going to, that's no other hurdle outside of my pay grade.
You do work with the university though out here on several projects, right?
Our commission does. I personally do not.
I'm sorry.
Yes, that's correct.
So possibly there's somebody out there that's familiar with the contract process, what they're doing to work with you guys that we could probably track down.
In terms of like these programs?
Yeah, somebody out here.
It's a different situation for
employed by the
universities, so
Orange
maybe you want to
Monster
explain that more.
That we could probably talk to.
Are you talking about delivery method, or what are you talking about?
I'm talking about the person that signs the contract.
It's a different situation.
Yeah.
I'll find them for you.
Well, that or Bowling Green may have their own staff. It's some
I think they
agencies
do.
and universities are granted this self-administration. They can do their own projects because they have the staff to support that.
We have a whole design and construction department.
Maybe another time we bring them in.
Any other questions?
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I didn't speak loud enough before, but regardless of whether we renovate or build new, we have to do something with the kids during that interim time, house them someplace. Is that cost part of what's figured into this project, or is that something separate?
Yes. When I said renovation, that we're providing space, what we call swing space, which is basically modular units to house half the kids in that building. Again, the theory is you renovate half the building, and then you move the kids out, and they move back in, and then you do the other half. So there's different approaches to that, but yes, we do consider, we do add some space dollars in.
Okay. I have, any other questions? All right. I have a list of questions that people have been texting me as we've been going along. My leg went to sleep. Oh. Okay. Number one, do you guys have anything that would support environmental? If the district, you had lead projects up there, but so there are people that are interested in whether or not there's things that would you guys would fund, that there was a special focus on being environmentally friendly, or
within our, if we're talking about an energy project, there is a group within our office, not me personally, that does that with districts. So if that's what we mean by environment, yes.
Or like sustainability using solar panels, wind power, things like that.
Yeah, our design manual contemplates some solar panel, but it isn't. It doesn't mean the structure's built to accept these huge arrays. It's more of a simple overlay of the roof.
And then what's the status of the air conditioning program? There was some discussion about trying to create a carve-out in the program where districts that just wanted to do air conditioning. And I know that was a proposal
that would fit best under our new AFAP program, which is an alternate facilities assistance program. But again, once the district decides to take that route, that they're leaving behind the others. So that's the road, that's the decision point, that's the consequence of that decision. So you could just, under that program, just do the air conditioning, assuming it met the local match and the state's match as well.
AFAP is a maximum $1 million from the state?
Or 10% of the state share, whichever's higher.
Whichever's higher.
Correct.
10%. And that money would be available.
Well,
is there a separate pot set up for that fund?
No. That's the other rub here.
Okay.
Just because you want to do AFAP does not move you up in line in terms of when you get served. You're still at the end of that 100 district list.
All right. The only other program that would allow the district to move up would be which? The exceptional needs program?
And that's an applicant-based building, and per building. The thing about ENP is exceptional needs. Yes, it allows districts to hire well to enter the early entry point and fund the program, but it also says you have buildings in really bad condition, and it's mainly safety, structural, really bad heating, environmental concerns. Different assessment than what you belong to. So it's kind of a catch-22 when you present, potentially presenting to voters. We've got a really bad building and we need to replace it because the state says so. So that's all that the question. That's the feature of that program. It's out there.
So the district, if they, let's just say they wanted to deal with Conneaut, and that building is probably in the worst condition of all the buildings. They decide they just want to do that building, they want to try to use the exceptional needs program to do that building. The state, it becomes a competition between Bowling Green and
other school districts in the buildings, applicant building under that same program. Okay. So we have 10 and there's only funding for 3. Probably depends where you stack up in that range.
Okay. But if we did, beat other districts.
Can't hear what you're asking.
Oh. You guys can't hear me?
No, I want you to hear that one.
Not that we want to.
Okay, so good evening. I'm glad everyone could come out tonight. We're going to get started with introducing Steve Roka. All right. I was asking about the Exceptional Needs Program. The Exceptional Needs Program provides the ability for you to possibly move from funding 10 years to 15 years in the future into a current funding window. If you have a facility, and he was explaining that the facility is in bad enough shape where when you compete against other school districts for buildings that are in bad shape, you could in fact be moved up to funding in the immediate round if there's money to fund you for that round. So I was asking him about, I know the answers to these questions, but I want him to answer them for you so that you guys don't think I'm reading the answers. The Exceptional Needs Program is a beauty contest or an ugly contest. Whoever has the ugliest school building wins the money. Okay? And so my next question was, if you have the ugliest school building and you win the money now, would you get the 17% now?
Yes.
Yes. He said yes.
But do you only do it for the building that was the ugliest?
Yes.
Right.
So
Not
if
the
you're,
whole project.
if it changes, that's, it does not lock your percentage for the future, simply for that one project.
So and I wanted you all to make sure you understood that the only program right now that exists that will move you up to get state money in the current window would be to qualify a piece of your project as an exceptional needs project. And that is a beauty contest or an ugly contest.
It's a building replacement.
Right, it's a building replacement. So I need you to make sure that, because everything is on the table.
But if
Okay.
we take the ENP,
Yeah.
then we disqualify ourselves from anything else.
Not necessarily.
No? Okay.
Even if you do ENP, does not preclude you from doing an L project in the future. However, if we did an L project and wanted to do ENP, that's where we can't do both. The sequence has to be ENP first, then L. If you start with L, you can't go back and do ENP.
So in a sequence here, in the ELF program, we got to go find our money, just like we were if we didn't even know you. We got to go get the money. We got to fund the money. And then we apply, and it just grew from 10 to 15 years. I did catch that figure. So we're talking 10. Now we borrowed this money for 37. So at 10 years in, we get our money and reduce our payments, possibly our debt load, all of that at the 10-year mark. So I'm still not seeing the downside here to not going with it. Because if we don't do it, we got to do the same thing, except there's no reward at 10 years. Is that about right?
Yeah, I mean, you guys are processing everything together.
But we're locked into square footage. Like, we can't go big, whatever the state says, we're locked into that.
You
square
can't, I thought you said you could, you just have to supply the money. We have to be.
Yes, it becomes a locally funded initiative, not a co-funded or pivotal part, yes.
So are you saying that we could replace Conneaut with the AFA too? Or whatever the acronym was?
Potentially, I mean.
Because if we found, or if they found out we had the worst building, we could replace that building.
Yeah, the question's going to become what you do with the other buildings, because again, we had to work within our program, or our guidelines.
Yeah, but if we could do that and you still could qualify for the other program?
Downstream you could, yes.
So in other words, we got, no matter how you look at it, we got a problem with Conneaut and we got a problem with space. So if you could take that program and get Conneaut back up to par
Replace it.
and not have to replace or fix it up and not replace it, now you're taking steps, and that building could, if we could get it up and done in 5 years, from 5 years on, now we could start coming back to the taxpayers because we got rid of a new renewal is supposed to be coming up and so forth. Now we're coming to the taxpayers with a little less burden because we got one of the problems solved. And we still got our capital improvement money out there, which is running forever. So wouldn't that not be a wise apply for that? And if we get it, we get it, and if we don't, we don't.
I think it's an option, and honestly, that's.
As long as it doesn't harm us, and I didn't hear it's being anything that's going to harm us.
It's an effort, okay, on the district's part to submit the application. But then we have to evaluate all the applications from all the other districts and submit them and then compare.
We're at the bottom.
No, just because, also let me say that just because you submit a building doesn't mean, maybe none of them get to that threshold.
Oh, sure. But if you don't do nothing, you ain't going to get nothing.
To answer, yes, it pays to ask the question.
And just with the ranking that you would see that we have currently in 2015, would that qualify us in that higher range?
Not necessarily. It's a
Like
different.
what you have seen, so, you know.
Well, I'd have to actually look over your building. That assessment, where we're showing 78%, is a different set of criteria than what the ENP is. Again, ENP is going to look at, are there significant masonry cracks in the building? Is there, you know, plumbing stuff or structural things that are beyond the kind of the point where it's creating an unsafe condition? Not necessarily that it's going to collapse, but you know, it's not great. Or do you have a lot of significant environmental things in there?
How does asbestos play into that?
It would be a consideration. We have a asbestos consultant part of the team. So
Just that theory I'm using, Pontiac ENP, Kenwood is in as bad shape as Pontiac.
Yeah, but I'm looking at getting rid of the worst one.
Well, but how do you elevate, I mean, you're
Well,
assuming
because Kenwood was still being qualified. And Kenwood, according to the 15, that cost 6.6 million. So we just put 4 million into the middle school.
That was 3 years ago.
I realize that.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question about that program? Did you say that it's a replacement?
yes,
So it would only build what we currently have, size-wise? I'm asking because our
you
enrollment is
can.
growing and we're out of space in that
You
building.
can build more, and let's say that you could do all your elementary kids, not just the ones that are going to Conneaut. But it's going to stay within that grade band of that building.
It's
It is
K-5
currently
building.
serving, yes.
So you could build one great big huge K-5 building.
Yep, good.
And the ratio is the same, that 83?
Yes, for today, yeah. Yes, ma'am.
If we accept Pontiac as our building, we have to stay on that property. For instance, if the community wants to consolidate all elementaries on a different campus,
It does not have to stay on that property. We're not, when we do our planning, we don't do in a sense it's property specific. Obviously, that's the district's choice where the building's built. So to answer your question, it could, yes, you could build a large building on a separate piece of ground.
But just one building.
You want to start, to serve the pre-K kids that are in the K-5 that are at Conneaut.
Okay.
Again, you can stretch as far as you want. Again, 350 is the minimum. We don't recommend that because of what I said earlier, but
One more question. All right, and my last question is, does the state allow local contractors to participate in the construction of the new facilities or renovation, or what are the rules around that?
Thank you. Good question, and we want to be sensitive to that. When you are, the answer is yes, and the best delivery model to achieve that is the construction manager at risk, because that's the one that allows the contractor to propose local subcontractors. The other ones, you could get a hard bid from, I don't know, some other distance, like Dayton, I don't know, just to throw a location out there. So yes, there are two delivery models that allow that, get you closest to that, are the construction manager at risk and the design build.
All right, great. No other questions? We're done. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Hopefully you guys got a lot of information tonight. You guys can, yes. Where's the sign-in sheet? Is it, whoever had it's in the back, the table in the very back. Yes, okay, I will be sending an email out with the PowerPoint for everyone, and then the videos will be on YouTube.